Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. So, all right. So before we begin, let me just remove this thing. Okay. All right. And then I will just share my screen. Okay. So before we begin, I think I would like to invite everyone once again to have this a brief disposition exercise. So let us just begin with this one. A brief disposition exercise. Let's first stop. Stop, S stand for stop, T stand for take a breath, and then O stand for observe, and P proceed. It's very simple 4-step that we need to do before we begin our program today. Just take a deep breath, inhale and exhale. And we will take this poem titled Slow by Marny Sklarov. You can join me slowly if you want to. You are allowed to go slow. You are allowed to be quiet. Make space and feel. You are allowed to have nothing to say and wait until you do. You are allowed to wait. You can just breathe sometimes and watch and see. You can be open to whatever comes next. You cannot know. You can want. You can be okay with your wanting. You can sit in your agitation, breathe into your irritability, and cry in your grief. You can wait for the truth. You can watch how you make up stories and love yourselves and wait until the true one reveals itself. You can do all kinds of things slowly. Let us just take this song as our prayer.
By the hand and help me face the rising sun. Comfort me through all the pain that life may bring. There's no other hope that I can lean upon. Lead me, Lord, lead me all my life. Walk by me. Walk by me across the lonely roads that I may face. Take my arms and let your hand show me the way. Show the way to live inside your heart all my days, all my life. You are my my feet all the time, my Lord, I need you there. You are my light. I cannot live alone. Let me stay by your guiding love all through my life. take the right direction, take your road. Lead me, Lord, and never leave my side. All my days, all my life, you are my light. You're the lamp upon my feet. All the time, my Lord, I need you there. You are my light. I cannot live alone. Let me stay by your guiding love all through my life. You are my light. You're the lamp upon my feet. All the time, my Lord, I need you there. I just cannot live alone. Let me stay by your guiding love all through my life, all through my days. So lead me, oh Lord. Lead me.
All right. So I think like what was mentioned earlier on, the session flow will be like this. We'll have the session proper first, and then short silent reflection for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we'll go to breakout group, sharing for about 30 minutes. And then we have this plenary conversation, open forum, closing remark, and closing prayer. So this is the flow. Now, you might wonder, why did I choose this title? Education as a means to save souls. So, education to save souls. How is that so? And you know what? One elder Jesuit told me before that, why exactly? Why did you choose souls? Why can't you just use persons? Well, nothing is wrong with that. Either one is fine. So for me, I just want to be faithful to the text used. It has been used repetitively. So, and again, saving souls is the 16th century language. So there you have it, the title itself, education as a means to save souls. So what education can do in my life. So when we talk about education, if you were to look back in your own experience, in your own life as a student before, you might be thinking education can be either a boring thing, it can be either a happy moment, or can be a bitter moment, because there's a lot of, this is especially when you're in high school, junior high school and stuff like that. It was that moment that you are really trying to explore the world, you're trying to explore this emotion, and that you just want to develop yourself. So for me, as I remember in my own high school time, I spent a lot to review my studies and everything and all. And then I also recall all these good friends of mine, all these good teachers and everything, So as a student, as you all know, we tend to just go with the flow, go with the flow, go with the flow, without really having the understanding what will this education lead me to, So later on, as I grew and grew a bit mature, I realized this education is not just education or just another intellectual field or industry, if you want to say it, But there is more than just that. Education actually really can save souls. And how so? This I remember myself having explored and involved myself actively in this parish, you know. And I remember one clear community that I involved myself into, the deaf community. The deaf community, they have the different language altogether. And then how can I then interpret the message of the gospel? It is not easy. You cannot just translate or interpret the language or the English as it is, because it will not making any sense for the deaf community. So here, this is when education comes into play. You have to almost instantly, almost immediately translate it from a normal human English speaking to a deaf speaking, no, to a deaf culture. For instance, I want to go to the cinema. For the deaf community, they will just say, I go cinema. So things like that, you know, so almost instantly. So therefore, I realized that, my education, after all, is not a waste. My many years of at having this education, go to school and stuff like that, there's a need for it. There's some sort of prepare me to something greater, to do something greater things. That is to have this pastoral ministry. And with this education, make me able to deliver the gospel and to service to others, and life experience, how education deals with life experiences. So this education is not entirely from the school and everything. You also can learn that through experience, life experiences like breakup, like going into a new phase of life, or moving in one place to another, how you deal with people, how you interact with people, and how you want to adapt to the culture. Like for my case, a Malaysian culture, I go to the Philippines, then how is that? How am I supposed to adapt myself to this? And all this, I did not matriculate in school. All this through life experience. So yeah, now having said that, then I learned this. I encountered this schoolmaster, and the schoolmaster of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. As I was doing my reflection on this, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, someone that I can really relate to, I can really connect myself with. First and foremost, is really because of his age. I myself, at about this age, I am 32 and Saint Ignatius, 33. So yeah, so this is the reason why I chose this particular topic. I chose this particular reflection, education as a means to save souls, because I know Ignatius himself have this difficulty in education, and he slowly and start at that very late age, you know, at 33. So this is what we call a grace of humility that Saint Ignatius had felt, and he showed how he wants to explore into this, and how he wants to save souls, but at the same time he also wants to educate himself. And then he therefore wanted to advance his education in the Barcelona, and formally entered and then started in the class at the age of 33. And all of his classmates, as I'm sure some of you already know this, all of his classmates are way younger than him. And that again, very dear to me, because I myself, at this age, entering into this school, and all of my classmates, they are all very young. So what is driving force for Ignatius? Precisely, there's this deep, intimate, religious experience. And because despite of all this age gap, and because of this deep, intimate religious experience that he has, There's no shame for that. There's no shame for him to enter and to continue, because he has this one very mission, that is to save souls. Now, one of the highlights of Ignatius' spiritual exercises comes early on in the form of the first principle and foundation, and that is a man was created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save souls. And this is the first principle and foundation, and this is the very first page in the spiritual exercises where St. Ignatius put this at the very beginning. And for him, he sees this as a very important message that everyone, before all else, this needs to be the first and foremost. To praise, reverence, and serve God, and by all these means to save his souls. God, who loves us, creates us and wants to share life with us forever. Our love response takes shape in our praise and honor and service of the God of our life. All the things in this world are also created because of God's love, and they become a context of gifts presented to us so that we can know God more easily and make a return of love more readily. And this precisely, we can see this in St. Ignatius of Loyola. Because of that great love, that deep, intimate relationship that he had, and the religious experience that he had, he wants to also have that experience shared to others. In the spiritual exercises, we contemplate the Trinity as it looks at the world in need of salvation and decides to send the second person to become man in Jesus. We then turn our contemplative gaze to Jesus himself as he goes around the towns and villages of Palestine, preaching and healing, calling others to be with him in this mission. And as a result of his way of living and talking, Jesus is led to his passion, where he suffers grievously, and all this for the salvation of souls. And that includes Ignatius. Ignatius' religious experience led him to carry on with this effort in mind, saving souls. So come to think of it, it must have been a very humbling experience for this once courtier to study with the children. But he couldn't care less, because he knew all along that it was really, the mission is to save souls, to rescue souls. And for me, I find it very striking, because Ignatius willingly accepted humiliation in order to serve others. He put down his ego. He put down all this facade that can be a stumbling block for him to really fulfill this call or his mission to save souls. And this cannot be done without that grace of humility. And now we move on to this grace of prudence. You see, not all good intentions will have good outcomes. We can see this in Ignatius' life. In Ignatius, again, because of his main focus is really to save souls. And that is a good intention. But the problem is that how he executed it was somewhat not so good. So it is here that he learned to balance that with prudence. So what happened was that when in Barcelona, Ignatius went so far in his desire to save soul, so as to subsequently imprisoned. As consequence, he was neither able to study nor give himself or give service to others. And truly, while completing those studies, he would gather the old and young to explain the Gospels and teach them how to pray. And you see, his well-desired ministry is somewhat good intention, but for the Spanish Inquisition, that is a bad execution. And because of that, he was suspected of spreading heresy, and that he was imprisoned. And because of this, he couldn't study anymore. Now, going back to the driving force that Ignatius had, his intimate religious experience with God, it did make sense that he wanted to do all this and all the more with gusto, with determination and eagerness. Just like when you are in love, you just want to do whatever you can to keep the flame of love alive and share it if you must. But his gustoness put him into trouble once again. And this time, Ignatius encountered another stumbling block that made him neglect his own studies, even if his motive were good. Again, good intention, bad execution. So, to strictly observe the vow of the poverty, chastity, and obedience, particularly for Ignatius, the vow of poverty, he would spend time begging for alms and live an austere life, penitential life, and doing the chores there. And because of doing all these things, he has no time to study. He has no time to even go and do some revision. As a result, he was deprived of sleep and could not give full attention to his studies. And while juggling all these hurdles, he continued to pray to God. He may be praying like this: God, I observe all the vow of poverty. I tried my best to be like you, to follow you. But why am I like this? Why am I not be able to focus in studies and everything? And in his prayer, his fervent prayer to God, then eventually he was blessed with spiritual insight that led him to grow in wisdom. And after some time, he went to ask help from the benefactors, because in the olden days, he has a lot of good friends that he can ask for money. But at the beginning, because of his strict observance to religious vow, he did not want to pursue it. And now, because of that, he realized, this cannot be done. I need to focus my study, but at the same time, I need money. So which one should I follow? And remember, his ultimate goal is to save soul. And because of that experience of being imprisoned, then he realized he cannot save soul without education because of the suspect of spreading heresy. Therefore, he asked now courageously to ask for the help from the benefactors that he knew in Spain. And because of that, he is able to support his studies. And because of it also, he is now have better focus on his studies alone. And from this experience, and by being faithful to prayer and putting his trust in God, Ignatius was led to a wiser and more prudent course of action. And this insight he gained from his own experiences he wanted others to take as guideline as well. As stated in the Jesuit Ratio Studiorum, all obstacles which hinder studies must be removed. Excessive distraction, devotion, and work for the neighbor must not be allowed to interfere with studies. You see, I think this is very, very important. Going back to my own personal formation in Loyola House, I remember the priorities like this. Since you're in a scholastic age, your information, first and foremost, is your education, is your studies. That is your priority. I remember from Secretariat Novitiate, and then I moved to Loyola House. My superior told me this: from now on, your mission is to study, nothing else. Wow, isn't that strange, right? I thought I submitted myself to serve, but now there's a big switch from prayerful, from doing all this apostolate and everything in the novitiate, and now move to Loyola House, focus on study. Study and study alone. Now, so you will later on answer why is that so. So again, in the Jesuit Ratio Studiorum, all obstacles which hinder study must be removed. Any excessive distraction, devotion, and work for the neighbor must not be the excuse that allowed to interfere with your studies. That's how important studies is for the Jesuit. Move on. A grace of depthness. I don't know, maybe you have not seen this word, depthness, but I would like to emphasize on this, depth, the grace of depth. So you see, Ignatius, we talk about his gustoness, we talk about his enthusiasm and his enthusiastic character. Again, all this led him to spending a lot of time in engaging in the apostolate. And again, this one caused him to being not able to focus in his studies. All this misled him into engaging too much in apostolate outside of his studies. So now again, Ignatius, he has this inclination. He attempts to study too many subjects concurrently, including philosophy and theology all at once. How is that even possible? In the Jesuit structure, we will have 2 years to 4 years of philosophy, and then regency, and then only theology. But this one, for Ignatius, imagine he wants to shrunk everything, cram everything, and study all at once, concurrently. And that is almost not possible. But again, as we already have seen the pattern of Ignatius, because of his gustoness, because of his enthusiasm, he wanted to do all this. Precisely because the mission of saving soul. He wants to save soul, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how ridiculous the plan was, he just wants to make it quick and get it done. But that is not what God wants. Again, go back to the earlier slide. Good intention, bad execution. Here you go. Then Saint Ignatius, our schoolmaster, then he realized because of that advanced and too rapidly in his studies, he realized that he has the need to solidify his fundamentals. Because as though he just want to do for the sake of doing and get it done and go out already and save souls. No, that's not what God wants of him. So then, because of that wisdom that he got, he eventually decided to return to the basics and found himself in class with children, this time in Paris for the second time. Again, I can actually relate to this one though. As I mentioned earlier, my age and Ignatius at this time, more or less the same. I also have that urge. Oh my God, this is gonna be taking a long time. I want to get it done. I want to get it over and then move on and then do ministry. But no, when I was doing my reflection on this one, it was a big slap on my face. Need to solidify his fundamentals. Solidify. Then I was like, imagine myself that I may be able to finish everything, or Ignatius may be able to finish everything, but the foundation, if as though you build the house on the sand, and when the sea water, and they just blow you away, and then there's no foundation at all. The need solidifies fundamentals. And so I myself learning, I myself being taught this time as though Ignatius was just at the back of my head. Hey, Jackley, nope, I've gone that path. I don't want you to do the same. Right. Now, the schoolmaster Ignatius realized of his misgiving and came up with this insight so that others won't follow his mistakes. Again, taking from the same Jesuit ratio studio room, it is better to learn a subject thoroughly than to try to grasp too many things at once and learn little of each or without understanding them well. There you go. Ignatius learned the hard way, and now he puts it in the studio room and wants all the members to learn this. Either you learned it well, or you don't understand at all, or you don't understand them well. I like to emphasize thoroughly. It is better to learn a subject thoroughly. Wow. The word thoroughly alone already emphasizes a lot of things that you want to learn something, or just if you just want to pick up skills like art, design, or musical instrument and stuff. If you just want to try out for the sake of trying out, then you wouldn't be able to do it well. You might as well just drop it and then just focus on things that you like the most, and then you learn that thoroughly. Either you learned it or you dropped it, either you don't understand or you understand but not well enough. To put into contemporary world, there is this saying that goes, it is better to travel well than to arrive. It is better to travel well than to arrive. What are we saying here? Well, when it is better to travel well than to arrive, it is actually meant that every single step of the way should be appreciated and acknowledged as being just as important as the destination or arrival. Let's highlight to that. Every single step of the way should be appreciated and acknowledged. Similarly to earlier on, it is better to learn a subject thoroughly than to try to grasp too many things all at once and you learn nothing. And here we go. In the contemporary world, every single step of the way should be appreciated and acknowledged. So in every single learning that you have, in every single knowledge that you acquired should be acknowledged, be it big or small, be it in the school or in your life experiences. It should be appreciated and acknowledged. And you enjoy the entire journey. You enjoy the entire learning. You enjoy the entire acquiring of this knowledge. And we want to emphasize on pouring attention into the journey. It is not about the destination. It is not so much about the arrival, but the journey. The journey, we can say, the process. The process that we want to acknowledge, the process that we want to appreciate. As humans, it is typically in our nature to always be looking forward and expecting the next best thing, the next adventure, and the next chance to be happy. When we do this, we automatically put so much significance on the future and on something that does not even exist yet. And we forget to be present, to be happy in the current moment, and to enjoy the entire journey. Traveling well or learning well ties into all of this, as it is putting emphasis on pouring attention into journey. And eventually, the ultimate destination will come. Likewise, it is putting emphasis on the act of acquiring knowledge and having to understand them well. And the journey is the process of learning. Let us just pause there for a while. Let's try to sink in with those. Pouring attention into the journey. Now, our current General Superior, Father Arturo Sosa, also has something to say, something similar. And I put it here. It is necessary to have an extraordinary intellectual depth in order to think creatively about how we can respond to Christ's call effectively. We are not meant to be dilettantes, but men deeply grounded in the spiritual life, in learning, and especially in our relationship with Christ. Look at this here. Father Arturo Sosa mentioned about yes, we want to have that depth in the intellectuality, extraordinary intellectual, but as we go down below, we also want to have this deeply grounded in the spiritual life and in learning also, and especially in our relationship with Christ. And this, isn't it similar to the earlier part, what we talk about, the first principle and foundation, man to praise, reverence, and save souls. So all this, the relationship, ultimately leading us to relationship with Christ. So education to save soul. How so? It started with all this intimate, deep connection with Christ, relationship with Christ. This is the grounding that we are talking about. As an educator, I think this is also what we need to do. Yes, we can guide people. Yes, we can teach people. Yes, we can be excellent in our teaching, our method, the way we put things up, the syllabus and everything. But we also need to look into this, deeply grounded in the spiritual life, in learning, and especially our relationship with Christ. First and foremost, this, the love, the relationship with Christ. And perhaps depth also can be mean how to give, how to respond in every aspect of our life. It is not so much about the intellect per se, but it is involving the head and the heart. The head and the heart. I remember the priest in the novitiate before. He mentioned this in his homily, Father Paul Zhao. He said, you know what? The hardest journey is the head to the heart. This is, although you just look down, is there. It's so close. But yet, that is also the most hardest and difficult journey to arrive. The head and the heart. You can be so good in your head. You can be so good intellectually. But when you have no compassion, that is difficult. I worry you are not educating people and save souls. Baka you shun away people with your intellect and everything. Boom, people are afraid of you. The students are afraid of you. So the journey in the head and the heart, a whole person. And here the question that we can ask ourselves, how can I be more loving? How can I be more generous, more forgiving, and more prayerful to ground ourselves in the spiritual life? And even, how can I be a better person? So from this glimpse into the life of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, we can now gather how he deliberately took education as a means to save souls. His zealous heart ransomed men. His missionary, educational, and charitable work continued to inspire countless people to deepen their knowledge in order to bring souls closer to God. Education as a means to save souls. Try to look at this way. Try to recall yourself as a student when you receive all that knowledge. And now you, as an educator, a teacher, how will you impart that knowledge to your students, to your pupils? How about those who are difficult behavior, those who are not able to stay alert in class, the very naughty? How are we then to educate these people? You see, as I mentioned to Mom Janet, I am currently attached to this St. Joseph Private Secondary School. So when we talk about secondary school, they are all between the age of 13 to 17. Oh my goodness, they are not easy. They are not easy, I can tell you that. And I can actually share the same sentiment, whoever that teaching this group of students. It's not easy because they can be rowdy, they can be very bad. But you see, one soul is enough. When don't expect to save the entire class or the whole entire institute. But if you can educate and save one soul, try to give a little bit more compassion to that one student, give a little bit more time to that one person, to that one student, then you have somewhat achieved this mission. Education as a means to save souls. Not easy, but possible. And this is our motto in our school, education beyond the ordinary. It's very short, but striking that, oh, when I first read it, education beyond the ordinary. Okay, I read the second time, education beyond the ordinary. Isn't it similar to our topic today, education as a means to save soul? Beyond the ordinary, meaning to say, beyond the textbook, beyond the classroom setting, beyond all this activity, workbook, and stuff like that. Education beyond the ordinary. And our Jesuit education here, the characteristic is we are looking into the totality, the holistic development of our students, development of the person. And this is what makes Jesuit education different from the other schools and what more the national schools we have in our countries. And I would like this to be shared for you guys, you know. Again, our superior, General Superior Arturo Sosa, wrote this in the book, Walking with Ignatius. And he said this, a good education includes learning how to handle tension and conflict as part of life and seeing both as opportunities for growth. Quite nice though. Father General Arturo Sosa did not mention about the book, did not mention about the whiteboard or Huawei smart board or anything. But that this good education includes handle tension and conflict as part of life and seeing these two as growth, a chance to grow. And that is the framework within which Jesuit schools and college educate. That's why they also develop a sense of solidarity and responsible local and global citizenship so that they, the student, may learn to actively engage in the life of their countries and the world and become sensitive to injustice and commit to implementing the changes needed for a better and more just future. I'm sure in our school, we talk about men for others, Majis, this is it. Become sensitive to injustice and commit to implementing the changes needed for a better, more just future. I don't know whether I have still enough time for this one, but I would like to show this. I'm sure you guys know this movie of Freedom Writers. So how bad the student, you know, but the teacher did not give up. did not give up because she wants to see the change, the growth in the students. If I may, I think I will just play this.
Yes, proceed, brother.
Okay.
California teacher whose story was turned into a movie.
I think anybody in that situation, you have to be scared out of your mind.
I was told that my kids would never read a book because they were too stupid.
It's actually school policy to shame the poor kids.
There is no way in hell that somebody like her was ever going to make a difference in my life.
The gangsters, the taggers, the chronically apathetic.
Stop acting like you're trying to understand our situation.
That was very evident, but they didn't want to be there.
I just get so emotional when I talk about them.
I'm not a counselor. I am not a therapist. How am I supposed to help these kids change?
40% of high school students have failing grades. You guys, 40%.
Some of the world's worst public schools.
They're going to turn into criminals.
A young girl walked in wearing an ankle monitor. She had a black eye, and she had a probation officer standing in the corner of my classroom.
I was scared of Maria, worried that she might shoot me if I said the wrong thing.
She was so defiant. She wrote, "I hate Aaron Gruwell, and if I wasn't on probation, I would probably shank her."
She tried to get to know me, and I made her pay for that.
All I wanted my students to do was put down that fist, put down that rock, put down that gun. At first, it wasn't so easy.
How did the first day of school turn tragic?
I initially explained the rules. We're going to stand on opposite sides of the room. Here's this tape in the center. I'm going to ask questions, and you come. My students thought, this woman is crazy. Why is she asking questions that have nothing to do with education? Question after question, they giggled, they came, they did fist bumps, high fives, they rolled their eyes, and that line became that gravitational pull, that the questions became real. And then I asked a question, and I should have phrased it differently, and I just said, stand the line if you have ever been homeless. And out darted Sue Ellen, and she went to that line like she had done on every other question about Snoop or movies or every other question. And she realized, I am all alone. And I watched her look at her feet. I think she just wanted to disappear. I think she thought in her head, hurry, ask another question. I just want to go back to the wall. I don't want to be seen. Because if they see me, they're going to know. They're going to know that I'm that girl that doesn't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And as she stood there looking at her feet, not wanting to acknowledge anyone or anything, suddenly out of nowhere came this beautiful girl with these bouncing braids, Tiffany. And when I'd asked that question originally, Tiffany told me she took a deep breath and walked backwards. And she saw Sue Ellen standing on that line all alone, and she realized that is my story. Tiffany walked to that line and she looked at every single one of us. She wanted us to see her. This little girl would stand on the corner of the busiest street in Long Beach, and she stood there with a cardboard box, "We'll work for food." So at the age of 14, that little girl was out on that street every single day. And yet she was standing on this line in this classroom. But she was so regal. She was so courageous. It's like she owned her story. And in owning her story in that glorious moment, out came Narada, this beautiful boy. And he stood by Sue Ellen, and he stood by Tiffany, and he stood there and he owned his story. And at that moment I knew, this is gonna change that game. And then in walked this little girl. She was so defiant. She had an ankle monitor, she had a probation officer, she had a father who was in a maximum security prison. And I found out that she had just been released from juvenile hall a few days before school started.
There was no way in hell that somebody like her and that looked like her was ever going to make a difference in my life.
So she picked up her pen and she wrote, "I hate Aaron Gruwell, and if I wasn't on probation, I would probably shank her." And in that moment, there was a part of me that panicked, and I thought, I'm not a counselor. I am not a therapist. How am I supposed to help these kids change? And I was told by the chair of my English department that my kids would never read a book from cover to cover because they were too stupid. So without really thinking it through, I just got in my car and I drove to a bookstore and I ordered 150 copies of the Diary of Anne Frank. And I gave them the book. Well, when I gave Maria the opportunity to pick up that book, at first it wasn't so easy.
Because she truly did not want to read it. In her mind, Anne Frank was not Latina. Anne Frank did not come from the hood.
I opened this stupid book because in the back of my mind, I thought that I was going to prove Ms. Grohl wrong.
She would come back every day and she would ask questions about Anne, kind of in juxtaposition to her gangster mentality. And I realized that she's actually reading.
It started getting interesting when things started going bad. That's when I thought, okay, maybe she's not this spoiled little girl that I thought she was. Maybe she doesn't have a perfect little life. And that's actually when I took a liking to her. I came to the entry where she's describing this window, her only connection to the outside world. She couldn't even put her hand outside because one of the Gestapo or somebody would know that they were in hiding. And then this bird lands close to her, to the tree and outside the window. And she writes, sometimes I feel like a bird in a cage and I wish I could fly away. I was able to relate to that feeling of knowing the outside world and only having this certain connection to it. And from then on, I knew she was gonna make it. She had to make it. She was gonna make it because why else would we be reading this book? And she's gonna make it because she's a good person and she hasn't done anything wrong.
Maria came in one day, stormed in, and threw the book across the classroom and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I was kind of taken aback and I said, "Tell you what?" And she said, "Why didn't you tell me that Anne dies?"
At the very end, when she doesn't make it, I felt that disappointment that I felt every other time in my life when I really believed in something. It was that same feeling of going to the window and waiting, hoping that my father was going to come home, and he didn't. Every feeling of disappointment all of a sudden came crashing together at that moment because I so desperately wanted her to make it. Because if she didn't make it, then what were the chances of somebody like me that was a bad person actually making it out?
I felt horrible. I felt horrible because I just assumed that maybe she had known. That I just assumed that everyone knew that Anne Frank was this iconic figure of this tragedy. I never wanted to take away my students' hope. She did make it, Maria. She did make it because she wrote about it. Because Anne Frank wrote about it. She's going to go on living even after her death.
For the very first time, I felt myself changing in a way that I couldn't explain or I couldn't describe.
Well, I wanted to give Maria and 149 others an opportunity for a second chance. And maybe they couldn't change that cast of characters they were dealt, but maybe they could rewrite their story. Maybe they could rewrite their own ending. So we decided that we were going to write to the woman who hid Anne Frank. At that time, she was 87 years old. She was living in Amsterdam. My students sat down at computers, the first time ever, and began to write and tell their story. When that 87-year-old woman, a simple secretary who had helped 8 people in an attic for 2 years in the middle of a war, in the middle of the Holocaust, when she sat down to read my students' stories, I think she saw something in them that she saw in Anne. Promise, potential, hope. She decided to hop on a plane, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of the side of the street they came from, regardless of what their parents did or didn't do. And she walked into our lives, and she gave my students a challenge. She challenged my students to make sure that Anne's death was not in vain. And in the distance, I saw Maria, this tiny little girl who would wear this ankle monitor every day, and her pants were sagging. And for the first time, she was this vision. And she said, "I don't want to be pregnant by the time I turn 15 like my mama. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life behind bars like my daddy. And I don't want to be 6 feet under by the time I turn 18 like my cousin. I want to change. And change she did. I watched 150 kids who weren't supposed to make it be the first in their families, the first to graduate from high school, be the first in their families to go off to college. My students went on to write a book. They'd never read a book before, and then they went on to write a book that was the #1 book in America. My students were able to take their story and put it on the big screen.
For a group of 150 students, change meant that they could rewrite their own ending.
Change is possible. At any time, at any moment, anyone can become something bigger. Be brave, be bold, change the legacy, and change the person you will become.
Education beyond the ordinary. These are all beyond textbooks. And this is not a knowledge that is selfish, circular, purely pragmatic. Love, service, justice, and faith become ultimate goals that are achieved through the formation of the individual and the community that he or she comes from towards the school of the heart. School of the heart. We talk about the head and to the heart. And in the movie, I believe Emily did not just purely using intellect, purely using all whatever method, but she dealt the students using the heart. She dealt the student beyond textbook. And for that, the student has changed. The student was bold enough to change the story. The students were able to change their lifestyle. They took the change, they took the courage, they took the opportunity to change the life chain in their life, in the family, to be someone else. You know, because again, I was working with these students also. Some students are really naughty. But if you have that little time with them, you ask them, wow, you will know that they are actually not, they act that way because at home, they were like the coward. They come from a broken family. Just that little time you spend, that will be greatly appreciated. The student will see that, my teacher is interested in my story. Our students, they have this suicidal thought. They have this depression. They have all kind of mental blocks and stuff, issues. Just that little time, if you are able to invest that little time beyond your period, the class period, it makes a great change, big change. And that's education as a means to save souls. Now, I've done with all the input, I've done with all the sharing. I would like to invite everyone to reflect on this, and then later on, we'll break into groups, maximum of 8 to 10 in the group. And I want you guys to share, reflect and share your own experience on these 3 reflections point. In your own effort, how can you then help souls? And what it means, in your own word again, to have depth in life. And finally, what struck you the most about Ignatius? And how would you like to emulate his example in educating and saving souls? I will copy this down and then I put in the chat box. And then after that, I will ask the moderator to break them into group. So you will have about 30 minutes to share. So I think that's all from me. Thank you. So thank you so much for everyone for your sharing. Thank you for all the words that you put on such chat, you know. And it's really on my part, as I share this to you, I also, when I read this, I also feel also the same way like you know, that I also feel grateful. I also feel reaffirmed. There's more particularly, I think the feeling right now is a journey, the journey or the companionship. Yeah, I think again, this reminds me of another sharing, you know, another anonymous what he said about a teacher and a pupil. So between destination, journey, and company, and then the people said company instead of destination, instead of the journey, the company. So I think the company here is also what we as a teacher, as Ignatian educators, we also need to accompany our students. Big or small, it doesn't matter, but the investment of your time, the investment of your interaction with them, that alone already suffice. That alone already, in your little way, in a creative way, already respond to God's invitation in saving souls. And also, I also have this reminded me also another Japanese philosopher. The philosophy of the Japanese about, if you already know about the kintsugi, there's another one is wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is another thing that I think every one of us can see it in the student. Wabi-sabi is something that you try to find beauty in the imperfection. You try to find something that is somewhat difficult to find the beauty in it, somewhat difficult to notice of that skill or the talent of the student, but you try the constant search. I think that the important thing to constantly searching in the beauty in the imperfection, wabi-sabi. So I think kung wala na, if there's nothing else, I would like to end this song to all of you educators. The song title, Carry Your Candle. Carry Your Candle by Chris Rice. And for that, maybe we can see our closing remark, closing prayer, and later on after this song, we end this with Glory Be. Are we okay with that? Okay. Sige.
Yes, brother.
There is a candle in every soul, some brightly burning and some dark and cold. And there is a spirit who brings a fire, ignites a candle and makes his home. Carry your candle and run to the darkness, seek out the helpless, confused and torn, and hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle and go light your world. Frustrated brother, see how he's tried to light his own candle some other way. See now your sister, she's been robbed and lied to, still holds a candle without a flame. So carry your candle and run to the darkness, seek out the lonely, the tired and worn, and hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle and go light your world. Whose hearts are blazing, so let's raise our candles and light up the sky, praying to our Father in the name of Jesus. Make us a beacon in darkest times. Carry your candle, run to the darkness, seek out the hopeless, deceived and poor, and hold out your candle for all to see it. Take your candle and go light your world. Take your candle and go light your world. Go light your world.
Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now,
and ever shall
and
be,
will be, world without end.
Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you.